Imagine this. London's West End, 1964. The velvet curtains have just closed on another sold-out performance of My Fair Lady. Julie Andrews stands in her dressing room, surrounded by flowers, basking in the sweet scent of success. Then comes a sharp knock. A studio messenger steps in, eyes lowered, clutching a telegram. Julie reads it once, then again. Her smile fades instantly. The message is simple and devastating. Warner Brothers had cast Audrey Hepburn as Eliza Doolittle in the film version of My Fair Lady. The very role Julie had originated, nurtured, and perfected, taken away. No warning, no explanation, just silence. And then, betrayal. Julie didn't scream or cry. She didn't plead or protest. Instead, she quietly set the telegram down on her vanity table and stepped out into the night. For years, Julie Andrews was the embodiment of grace and royalty, always poised, always kind. But behind the regal demeanor and flawless soprano was a woman carrying the weight of 7 betrayals, 7 names, 7 scars, stories she never shared publicly. Until now. These aren't stories of petty jealousy. They are tales of quiet sabotage, professional slights, and deep emotional wounds. And it all began with the woman who unknowingly took her crown, Audrey Hepburn. Julie and Audrey never exchanged harsh words in the press. They never had public fallouts. But the tension between them was unmistakable, subtle yet sharp, like the lingering scent of perfume in a sealed dressing room. Invisible but always there. Warner Brothers didn't pass over Julie because she lacked talent. It was Hollywood politics. Audrey Hepburn was the bigger star, the safer bet at the box office. And so the decision was made, calmly, coldly, behind closed doors. What hurt Julie the most wasn't just the rejection, it was the silence that followed. Audrey never reached out. No letter, no phone call, not even a nod in passing at events. Just an icy void on every red carpet they shared afterward. And in that silence, Julie found all the answers she needed. She confided quietly to friends. She's lovely, but that role was never hers. And the final blow? Audrey didn't even sing. Her voice was dubbed. Meanwhile, Julie's soaring, emotionally rich vocals, once the heartbeat of Eliza on stage, were pushed aside. The same voice critics called too theatrical for film. While Audrey mouthed the words, Julie's voice gathered dust. The Academy tried to make it right by awarding Julie Best Actress for Mary Poppins that same year. But to her it felt less like a victory and more like a polite apology, a consolation prize wrapped in gold. She smiled for the cameras as she always did, but inside the silence thundered. And yet, this was only the beginning. Another wound came from a man she once shared the spotlight with, Rex Harrison, her original Broadway co-star. The charm and ego that defined him also made him dangerous. Rex was already a legend when the film version of My Fair Lady was being cast. But behind the scenes, he reportedly worked to ensure Julie wouldn't join him on screen. Too virginal. Too stiff, he supposedly told the director, not as constructive criticism but as a dismissal, as if all her work on the stage meant nothing. Julie stayed silent for decades. But in the 1990s, over tea with an old friend, she finally shared what many had suspected. Rex didn't want me on that set. He made sure I was kept off it. To Julie, this wasn't just about losing a role. It was a personal betrayal. She had shaped Eliza with warmth, intelligence, and wit through hundreds of performances. Yet when it came time to immortalize her, creation on film, the door was closed in her face, and Rex walked through it without her. The cruelest twist? Rex Harrison won the Oscar for that very role, the one Julie had given her voice, her heart, and her soul to. As he stood on stage accepting the Academy Award, she sat at home, watching in silence. The applause, the acclaim, it went to someone else. Years later, they crossed paths again at a theater reunion in 1982. Julie walked right past him, no smile, no handshake, no acknowledgement. To strangers, it may have looked like a missed moment. But for those who knew, it was a quiet message. A grudge preserved with grace. Not all betrayals, though, came from co-stars. Some came from those wielding the baton, like Henry Mancini. Julie adored music. It was more than her profession. It was her essence. So when she was asked to perform at a televised concert led by Henry Mancini in the early 70s, she saw it as an honor. Mancini, after all, was the man behind Moon River and the Pink Panther. Working with him should have been a dream. At first it was. The orchestra rose, her voice soared, and everything clicked, until rehearsal took a sharp turn. Mancini abruptly stopped the music, walked over and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Let's try that again, with a little less choir girl and a little more woman." The room fell silent. It wasn't a note, it was a jab. To him it was direction. But to Julie, it was a cut straight to the core. Still, she nodded politely, resumed singing, and completed the session with professionalism. But something inside her cracked. She never worked with him again. Later, she confided to a friend, "He didn't critique the note. He critiqued me, my essence, my voice." She never called him out in public. That wasn't her style, but in private circles she referred to him as the man who tried to rewrite my soul. She continued to sing for millions, but that wound never truly closed. To be asked to be less of herself, to be told that her voice needed to change, left, a scar she never forgot. But perhaps the most painful betrayal of all wasn't professional. It was personal. Emma Thompson, the friend who became the critic. They were supposed to be soul sisters of the stage, both witty, warm, and beloved across generations. Julie and Emma had long shared admiration, always exchanging kind smiles at industry events. Julie believed Emma was the kind of intelligent performer who could carry on the legacy of British theatrical brilliance. So in 2005, when Emma Thompson began working on a remake of Nanny McPhee, Julie reached out quietly through her agent. Cameo, a voiceover, even a small tribute, something to acknowledge her place in the story. What came back was a firm rejection. According to a producer in the room, Emma's response was cool and professional. "Julie's era has passed. We want something edgier." The words weren't intended to wound, but they did. Deeply. Julie didn't complain. She didn't protest. She simply stepped back with the grace she was known for. But that night alone, she told a friend on the phone, "I suppose there's no room for manners in modern magic." Julie Andrews never watched Nanny McPhee, not out of resentment, but because watching it would have made the rejection feel permanent. To the industry, it had been nothing more than a casting decision, impersonal, professional. But to Julie, it was a wound. A quiet message that said she no longer belonged. It wasn't just about losing a role. It felt like losing her place. She once confided during a hushed lunch in Belgravia, "It's the ones you admire who hurt you most." And, once again, the pain came, not from an enemy but from someone who shared her musical soul, Barbra Streisand. A duet that never happened. For years, fans dreamed of it. The two titans of musical cinema, fire and ice, raw power and refined elegance. It seemed inevitable. Record labels loved the idea. Variety teased it. Broadway insiders whispered about it behind velvet curtains. But it never came to be. According to those close to the matter, it wasn't about scheduling or logistics, it was something deeper, something sharper. Barbra reportedly once dismissed the idea in private, saying Julie was technically perfect but emotionally distant. The comment wasn't meant for public ears, but it found its way to Julie through someone she trusted, and it hurt. Julie had always spoken highly of Barbra, calling her bold, brilliant, fearless. She had defended her in the press, applauded her daring, and called her a phenomenon. So when that cold, cutting judgment reached her, Julie didn't strike back. She went quiet. Later, in a rare interview, when asked about a potential duet, she responded with a simple, devastating line, Some voices don't blend. Just 5 words, but they landed like thunder. It was one of the few times Julie used language as a weapon. Controlled, clear, unmistakable. And with those words, the fantasy of a Streisand-Andrews duet vanished. But even that heartbreak couldn't match the silence that followed an even, deeper betrayal. One that came from the man she loved most, Blake Edwards. Her husband, her creative partner. Their love story had the makings of a Hollywood classic, actress and director, muse and maker. But in 1981, on the set of S.O.B., that partnership was tested. The film, a satirical jab at the industry, demanded something shocking. Julie, the beloved and immaculate Mary Poppins, was asked to appear topless, for the first and only time in her career. Blake insisted it was satire, necessary, clever. Bold subversion of her image. Julie hesitated, but she trusted him. He wasn't just the director, he was her husband. What followed wasn't freedom. It was quiet devastation. In the aftermath, she admitted to friends that the scene meant to be cheeky, fractured not just her public image, but something inside her marriage. The media swarmed. Fans were confused. Julie felt exposed in every possible sense. Behind closed doors, the arguments with Blake weren't about nudity. They were about control, about power, about betrayal. A close friend once said, she gave him her career, and he gave her a script that mocked it. Though time softened their tensions, the wound never fully healed. Julie forgave him, but she never forgot. Behind every red carpet smile, every public show of unity, the memory lingered. What it felt like to be exposed by the one person who was supposed to protect her. Then there was the name she never spoke aloud. Not until now. Walt Disney. The man who gave her a dream and clipped its wings. He introduced her to Hollywood, gave her Mary Poppins, gave her stardom, but he also gave her something harder to carry. Rules, expectations, an image too perfect to escape. Julie adored Walt. She often praised his genius, his magic, his visionary mind. But behind the curtain was control, always smiling, always graceful. He didn't just create a character, he created a cage. When Mary Poppins became a global phenomenon, Julie hoped it would lead to deeper roles, more complex stories. But instead, Disney's team gave her a warning. Don't ruin the image Walt created. She wasn't just Julie anymore, she was Mary. Studios called for sweetness, not substance. Producers wanted charm, not challenge. Every time she tried to break the mold, she was gently steered back into it. In a rare, unguarded moment, she told a friend over lunch in the English countryside, Walt gave me wings, but only if I agreed to stay in the cage. It wasn't anger she carried toward him. It was something sadder, something that lasted longer. It was heartbreak. And so began her quiet rebellion. Julie Andrews never screamed into microphones. She never lashed out, never leaked, never posted. But now, at 89, she's speaking her truth, not in bitterness, but with clarity. She was polite until she was ignored, kind until she was dismissed, graceful even as the world tried to reduce her. 7 names, 7 betrayals, 7 moments that chipped away at the porcelain image the world demanded she uphold. But beneath the polish was steel. Julie Andrews didn't just survive. She soared. Through silence, through heartbreak, through betrayal, and now at last the world is finally listening.